would happen if a nuclear bomb dropped? What would it look like? How much damage would be done? How many lives lost? We don't have to wonder about those questions because we know the answers. It actually happened right here in this city in southwestern Japan. This spot will always have a special place in history, the target of the world's first atomic bomb. 90% of this town wiped out in an instant. The bombing that helped America and the Allies end World War II was just the beginning for a community in crumbles. Upward of 70,000 residents immediately killed, tens of thousands of others dying a slow death from radiation in the decades that followed. How does a city come back from a nuclear bomb? What's Hiroshima like now? And what is its legacy for the people whose lives were directly touched by the bombing?
My mother's side is from Hiroshima, and they all passed away during the war and during the bombing.
See this marker on the sidewalk right there? If you weren't looking, you'd never find it. They say that is the exact hypocenter of where the first nuclear bomb used in war dropped. And we're taking you there in this very special episode of Window Seat. First thing you notice now if you visit the city of Hiroshima nearly 80 years after the bomb dropped is the one thing that still seems relatively untouched from August 6, 1945. This building, called the Atomic Bomb Dome.
It's basically just a cage on top of that dome. Just the cage and then a building that's been blown apart. And they do work on it every couple of years to make sure that it looks exactly as it did on that day in 1945. And it's just a shell of what it formerly was.
These days they call it the Hiroshima Peace Memorial, but back then they called it the Prefectural Industrial Promotional Hall. It served as a location to promote businesses in Hiroshima. Somehow, the A-bomb dome survived the atomic bomb mostly intact. Aside from its crumbling walls and skeletal roof, it's hard to even notice that a nuclear bomb was dropped here.
Honestly, the city is thriving, all things considered, but you can see the remains of very, very little. Only the dome, the atomic bomb dome, is still intact today. Everything else has been completely destroyed and then rebuilt in the last 70 or so years.
Hiroshima was a military center for the Japanese during World War II, making it a target. At 8:15 a.m. on that August morning in 1945, during the final stages of World War II, a B-29 bomber named the Enola Gay dropped the first atomic bomb used in warfare, codenamed Little Boy, on this exact spot, Ground Zero, for the world's first nuclear bomb. It took nearly a minute to drop from the sky, and when it did, the explosion obliterated a nearly 5-square-mile area. About 70% of the town was leveled. All these years later, Hiroshima is still one of this country's most popular tourist attractions. Hundreds of thousands of people flock here every year to learn more about this devastating bomb. But these days, this country wants to be more synonymous with peace than war.
I think that peace is attainable, but in order to attain peace, we need to come together as a world. We need to erase barriers of class, gender, race, nationalities, and recognize each other as human beings, because when we see the humanity in each other, it makes it a lot more difficult to hurt one another in this way.
Tourist May Lieritz came here to see the devastation.
So I wanted to see sort of the after effects of that, what it looks like today.
And learn from its history.
I'm just doing a quick tour of the country. My family's actually from Japan. My grandmother was born here, and so just want to get in touch with my roots a little bit.
The message of peace is driven home across the river from the A-bomb dome at the Peace Memorial Park, where you'll find this arched tomb designed to represent a shelter for the souls of the victims. Every August 6th at 8:15 in the morning, a ceremony is held here with families of the deceased. The cenotaph perfectly frames the A-bomb dome off in the distance and is usually adorned with flowers, honoring those killed all those years ago. Once you pass through the massive open space and peace gardens dedicated to the victims, you'll come to the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. At the top of the escalator there, a timeline of Hiroshima from its origins to the day that changed this city forever. That A-bomb dome, by the way, this is what it looked like before the bomb was dropped. Further inside the museum, you'll find an interactive map of the city showing what it looked like before obliteration and what little was left after. Videos playing in the lobby share the first-hand stories of survivors from that day.
It is very emotional for me to come back, to be at the Peace Memorial, to really pay my respects.
But what struck Mike here, who lost relatives in the bombing, were the stories of those who didn't survive, especially the children.
As an educator, for me, it was the stories of the young, the kids, right, and their lives and what happened with their parents. And I think of, back in the States, we have so many kids, and God forbid something horrific would happen to our families.
3 days after the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, another was dropped on the Japanese city of Nagasaki. Another 40,000 people were killed there. Those bombs had their desired effect. The United States and its allies wanted the Japanese to surrender, bringing an end to World War II. And 6 days later, the Japanese emperor did just that. The war was over, and the world changed forever. A lot of time has passed. Broken stone, rusted metal, and that skeletal roof are some of the only reminders of that August day in 1945. But the people who live here hope the rebuilding they've done in Hiroshima, the lush gardens they've planted, the monuments and memorials, and the museum serve as the most enduring reminders of them all. And serve as an admonition to the world that what happened here should never happen again.